Hello everybody, this is Gregory with How I Lost Over 100 Pounds, and I've kept it off for 30 plus years, where there should be no hesitance in your weight loss and weight maintenance. Today we're going to talk about and reflect on kind of a more society political topic and talk about how America is in a collective depression and how you can see it manifested in different ways. Now before I begin, if you need help with weight loss, contact me through the Clarity FM link found here in the episode notes. Also check out my website, which has several hundreds of articles and recipes that might be useful to you. My 2 books, which you can find on Amazon, my movie podcast, The Cinema Rag, which you can find on Spotify and Apple. And lastly, if you appreciate my content, there's a link on for PayPal. Now, I think the West, but particularly America, is in a state of collective depression. Now hear me out. I don't necessarily mean that you're depressed or that I am depressed, but I think as a society, we are in a collective depression. And why do I say that? Because you can look at outward signs of inner dysfunction. And if the main one, of course, that's going to be centric in this particular episode is obesity, right? You have people that are obese, and they're mostly obese or struggling with food issues because they have a disordered relationship with food. And part of the time, many times, we eat out of emotion, stress, childhood trauma. And so when we turn to food in an unhealthy way, we tend to over-medicate, overindulge, numb the pain, use it for nurturance. Like I had a very distant, aloof mom growing up. She was always on antidepressants. And as a young child, well, she wasn't giving me the nurturance, so I turned to food. So I think you could say that just the fact that the majority of Americans are overweight, 70% of Americans are overweight, and that number would be higher if you look at just over the age of 40, that is an outward sign or a glimpse that people aren't happy. Because if people are happy, they're not going to be overindulging and looking and gaining weight. Concomitant with that would be alcohol dependence. Now, alcoholism is defined by it affecting your work and your relationships. But there's a lot of alcohol dependent people, meaning they need to drink every day to just maintain some level of normalcy, and they don't even know they're emotionally dependent and they use it as a crutch. There are people like, I got to get home and I got to have my glass of wine or my beer. And then on the weekends, I got to be essentially, if I'm at home at least, hopefully not driving, but if I'm at home, I need to be kind of in a perpetual buzz. So these are alcohol dependent people. Again, if you're happy and you're healthy, you're not going to need to turn to booze. Now, a lot of these people would even recognize that they're turning to booze to numb some sort of pain because they're just so steeped in cognitive dissonance and they can't even admit that they are dependent on the alcohol. And you know they are, because if you were to tell them, hey, give up booze for 2 months, they couldn't do it. So you see people turning to alcohol to be in an altered state. You can certainly say the rise of drug use in America as well is another indication. We see the legalization of marijuana and other kind of hallucinogenic drugs, and the normalcy, the normalizing of that is another indication. I mean, you can look at it compared to like 50 years ago. Even 50 years ago, most Americans were not overweight, and most Americans were not indulging in recreational drugs. That's not to say that no one was, and certainly in the radical 60s, there were pockets that were doing it, but that itself has been popularized into believing that everybody in the late 60s was doing drugs. No, the typical suburban or inner city American who was holding down a job was not lighting up the ganja every night. And so they weren't needing to turn to food and to drugs. So you see that. Another outward sign. Another outward sign is the way we dress. You look around today, people don't dress up. That's a sign of lack of confidence. When you go out and you're just wearing your sweats or t-shirts with holes in it or whatever it is, again, if you look at pictures from America in the 1890s, 1900s, 1910s, even the poor, when they were out and about in the streets, you can see this in like Taylor Sheridan shows, in any show, would at least put on trousers and a dress shirt. They just put on whatever best clothes they had, and you would only wear jeans at work. I mean, that was the whole reason that denim was created. And thick khakis as well was work. But you see now just the normalization of just wearing garbage out in public. And again, outward sign of inner depression. And so I just see, you look around, and I think part of this is also the multi-generations of divorce, which people who have divorced, and I'm a divorcee, many times won't admit that it does affect the kids negatively, and we know every objective indicator tells you that. Higher rate of dropping out of school, higher rate of promiscuity, higher rate of incarceration, and then just higher rate of divorce later on because they have They have attachment issues, pair bonding issues. And so those kids who grow up with the trauma of divorce grow up, and then they too are damaged people who are interacting with other damaged people who can be products of divorce. And then you have multiple generations of that. Then you throw in just kind of the eschewance or the turning away of religion, which was something that was cohesive, that was good for society. Then you throw in the Tinder world, the social media world that lends to narcissism and sexual promiscuity, and all these things just kind of make this cocktail of dysfunction that make me think that we are in a collective depression. And look, if everybody was regular weighted and not boozing it up and not doing drugs and still wearing their Sunday best, I would say otherwise. And I'm not saying like there was no alcohol issues in 1880 Wyoming. I mean, they were boozing it up there too. What I'm saying is that we were a more cohesive society. And now I think most Americans can be honest and say that we are a broken society, that America is not succeeding. Make America great again. And I'm not saying it because I'm a Trump supporter, but I think that in itself, the phrase lends to the idea, and Reagan said this in the 1980s, that our best days are behind us. And so what can we do? Well, we need to become unencumbered if you have alcohol dependence, drug dependence, shopping dependence. We need to be unencumbered from our attachment to food. We need to do the best that if you're married, to stay married. And or if you're not married, if you want to marry, to pick somebody and vet them very well. I think going back to religion, turning back to religion would be a good thing. These are all good things that I think are good for us. But in particular, this channel, again, do the deep work. Why are you having that third slice of cake? Do the deep work. Why are you going to Wendy's and getting tons of fast food? I did an episode at the Awaken Man, the podcast, the other podcast I have, about 3 years ago, about how 50% of American men eat out daily. So, I mean, even if you're not overindulging in junk food, just eating daily junk food doesn't help. So we need to step back and be cognizant, like, yes, I am turning to food, I am turning to alcohol, I'm turning to drugs, I'm turning to screens, I'm turning to all these things to numb a pain. And the better thing to do, guys, in the long run is confront your trauma and address it and deal with it. Because once you do that, kind of like in sci-fi movies, right? Once you kill the demon, once you throw the ring in the fire, things will return to balance and peace. Guys, post in the comments. I'd like to hear from you. Hit the notification, subscribe, and share button. Until next time, take care. God bless and pray.